They flew a drone into our house and then proceeded about 40 or 50 agents to begin searching it. I had no idea what it was about. This very heavily armed response was our first interaction, including our defense attorneys. They were shocked that the government had done this because it is, such a blatant violation and really goes against how things are supposed to operate. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much privacy in their everyday lives has been eroded already. So the double standard, it's so blatant that these people knowingly had to do these checks, and the result of that is they pay a fine and get to continue with their lives. We get, raided and guns pointed at us, and now my husband's in jail. So, yeah.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Lauren Rodriguez to the podcast. Lauren is the wife of Keonne Rodriguez, who is the co-founder of Samourai Wallet, a non-custodial open-source Bitcoin wallet built for privacy and self-custody. Keonne and his co-founder, Bill Hill, are currently serving federal prison sentences in a case many believe criminalizes software development. Samourai Wallet never held custody of user funds and never acted as a financial intermediary. Lauren is here to raise awareness about his case, share the human impact of what has happened, and advocate for her husband's freedom. Welcome to the Bitcoin Age, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Paula, for having me.
And I'm sorry about what happened to your husband and for what you are going through. For listeners who are new to this, tell us a little bit about what happened the night you were raided by the FBI.
So I'll start with, Samourai Wallet was as you said, non-custodial. It was a BIP 39, Betch 32 Bitcoin wallet. So users had control over their funds the whole time. They were in operation for about 10 years before any of this happened. We, were operating under FinCEN's guidance and thought we were perfectly within the bounds of the law. That was until April 24th at about 5 a.m. We're in Western Pennsylvania. Our dog actually started barking first, and that was unusual. He went to the window and it woke us from our sleep, and we went out and we saw a crane raising a light into the bedroom window. Still not really sure what was going on. They then started on a loudspeaker blasting, Keonne Rodriguez, this is the FBI, come out with your hands up. So, we stumbled downstairs. I was, concerned for our dog. So I wanted to make sure he had his leash on, because unfortunately, there's a reputation of police killing people's pets in these kind of situations. So we make our way out, and a lot of it's still kind of blurry from, just waking up and adrenaline rushing, not knowing what's going on. We go outside and, there's laser sights pointed at both of our chests, and there's we live in a very small town. It's a little historic village, and the house is completely surrounded with FBI HRT agents dressed in tactical gears with, the night vision goggles and armed to the teeth. And, at that point, I was handcuffed, and Keonne was told to get down on his knees, and he was handcuffed, and we were separated. He was placed in a back of a local cop car, and I was held outside, in the cold. This is April, still pretty cold here, in my pajamas, while I was able to still see the house. They flew a drone into our house and then proceeded about 40 or 50 agents to, again, enter our small 2-bedroom home. I don't know where they all fit, to begin searching it. As you can imagine, quite terrifying and disorienting. And at this point, I had no idea what it was about. I was just standing there watching. I asked the local officer, is there, like, why are you here? What's going on? Thinking it must be a mistake. Maybe they have the wrong house. Have we been swatted? I know that's a thing that people have to deal with. And, he said, I don't know. The FBI showed up and I'm supposed to be off shift. And that's the only information I had for about a half hour until they had cleared the house. And then they brought me inside and, pretty much told me, we have a warrant for your husband's arrest. And it would be best for you if you leave the premises while we search. And again, I was concerned for my dog and needed to call attorneys and kind of figure out what are the next steps. We didn't have, I had never experienced anything like this. I will make note at this point, like this was our first interaction, as Samourai Wallet or, even personally, but with law enforcement at all. They had never contacted asking, for help or clarification about how the technology worked. They never sent a letter saying, hey, you're under investigation. Don't destroy, any paperwork, which is, oftentimes what they'll do, especially in white collar cases. It was this very heavily armed response was our first interaction.
I mean, that sounds terrifying. And for a non-violent criminal, why do you think they went so extreme?
Um, I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's probably a mix of two things. I think one, it's a way to intimidate the industry as a whole. That if you're doing something we like, this can happen to you. This can happen to your family. So don't work on privacy software. Don't that. But then also, I think it's a mix of they have to justify their use of tax dollars to buy this equipment. You have a major MRAP armored vehicle that looks like it should be in a war zone. Well, if you're not using it to do raids on sleepy little towns, then I guess your budget. That's my only thought. I mean, they flew agents from across the country to come here, and on top of that, this was a coordinated raid on us here in Pennsylvania and Bill, who, as you said, is Keonne's co-founder of Samourai Wallet. He was living in Portugal at the time, so they had obviously had to fly FBI agents over to Portugal, work with the local police there, and then do this simultaneously for whatever reason they thought that was necessary.
So, would you say that you believe that they were just trying to make an example of Keone and, like you said, people who advocate for privacy, which I thought was okay in the US? Has this changed your feelings on how things really are?
Yeah, I mean, you would think, right, with the Fourth Amendment, unlawful search and seizure, that should apply to people's finances as well. Not only, right, like we could talk about the different levels of why someone would want privacy on an open public blockchain. There's so many reasons, right? We have privacy in a lot of aspects of our life for very good reasons, and not even just from the government. There's been such an uptick the past year, with the rise of the price of Bitcoin. There's the rise of, fortunately, violent attacks by criminals to rob people of their Bitcoin. So there's a lot of need for privacy, and it should be protected in a lot of ways, and especially the privacy services that Samurai Wallet was offering were following the guidelines, to the letter. The FinCEN, which is the financial, I forget the acronym, what it stands for, but they're in charge of kind of illicit finance and financial institution regulation. And they put out guidance in 2013 and then reiterated the same guidance in 2019. And in the 2019 guidance, they even specifically call out anonymizing software providers. And it says in that language, if you're not a custodian, if you don't hold anyone's currency, Bitcoin, then you do not need a license. That this is a perfectly valid, and they clearly saw the need for financial privacy on a public ledger. So yeah, I think particularly the Biden administration who started this they came down not only on us, but before us, they came down on Tornado Cash, which is an Ethereum privacy protocol. So it really seemed to be they were going after privacy providers on cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, this is really an incredible story. Let's go back to the trial and, well, maybe there wasn't a trial. I think maybe you can explain. Was there a trial and how did that go?
So we didn't end up taking this to trial, although so my husband and Bill ended up pleading out, but the process took. It was definitely, I guess, a learning experience too, how slow the criminal justice system works. And there's various reasons why, it happens. In our case, once we got the charges, and both charges were conspiracy charges. They were conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money service business and conspiracy to money launder. And both of these were not true. There was never any intent to do either of these things, but through the process, one of the first things you do after you are indicted and this starts is discovery. And we had a few batches of discovery, and it took months. And one of the reasons it took so long was because I believe the discovery was terabytes and I think it was 17 terabytes, which Bill's attorney said to the court, if this had been printed out on paper, it would reach the moon and back 22 times, 75% of the Library of Congress. Like, this is an insane amount of data, which the government is handing over to us as the defense, and we have to pay lawyers to go through every item because they don't give you a little folder that says, this is the information that's good for you, and this is the information that, we're going to try to use against you. It's just all intermixed. So that definitely slows down the process. And through discovery and, from what they had quoted in the indictment, what became apparent is they really didn't have anything. The only evidence that they were citing were, statements made. So you would think covered under under First Amendment things, and a lot of them were public statements as well. And you may disagree with the language that was used, but a lot of it was taken so drastically out of context where they kind of twist it and make it seem bad. But like, if you would read a sentence above or the next paragraph under in these text threads, you would have a completely different picture painted. And coming from someone who, this was our first interaction with, it's just not how I thought the US justice system worked. And so that was definitely a shock. So through the process, we kind of find that, and we're feeling pretty good because we know that there was never any conspiracy to commit crimes, to money launder. Even the way the technology was set up, it was you gain the most privacy by moving slowly through the system, and everyone was non-custodial, so I don't know how you can launder something you don't hold. Like, there's all these things that we were feeling confident. We had attorneys, that were advising the company that said, yeah, you're within the bounds of FinCEN guidance. What you're doing is legal. So, like, all of these things, we were ready to go to trial. So part of the political process, or not the political, sorry, the seems like a political process, the court process is, there's different steps and different motions that you make. And one of the motions is a motion to dismiss. A motion to dismiss is you take everything that the government has put forth in the indictment and say, even if all these facts are true, then it still doesn't meet, the burden of a law being broken, and here's why. So there's that. There was also, what came up in discovery is that the government had suppressed that they'd contacted FinCEN through the court, actually 6 months prior to indicting. They contacted FinCEN and asked them, hey, do you think Samourai Wallet is a money transmitter? Do you think, they're breaking your guidance, and they should be operating with a license? And FinCEN said, no, they don't take custody. We don't think they're a money transmitter. Therefore, they would not need a license. So they hid this information for us for over a year until our lawyers directly asked them. This is called a Brady violation, and so we also had a motion before the court to rule on this Brady violation. It's a really big deal. When other attorneys outside of our defense attorneys heard about this, and including our defense attorneys, they were shocked that the government had done this because it is such a blatant violation and really goes against how things are supposed to operate. Um, and then the third kind of major piece, or some other minor motions, but the third major piece was a request from industry participants to submit something called amicus briefs. And amicus briefs is a friend of the court. And since this is such a technical topic, our judges, they are maybe experts in the law, but they can't be experts in everything that comes before them. So this is an opportunity for industry participants that this could affect to submit their understanding of things, just to inform the court. It's, give them more knowledge and they can take it or reject it. It's just, and usually they are accepted because it is, just additional information. So we had all these motions pending, and a few days before we're supposed to go in front of our judge, and our judge at the time was Judge Berman, all of a sudden, out of the blue, we still don't know why, he has recused himself, and we have a new judge. Our new judge is Judge Denise Coates, and we've never appeared in front of her before. And we go before her, and at this court appearance, we're supposed to be having oral arguments and saying, this is why you should side with us, judge, on these different things. And she, we expected it to be a couple hours long court appearance. And she, from the bench, says, all the motions are denied. Thank you. Have a good day. It was just that. She didn't explain why she was denying the motions, orally at the time or in writing subsequently. And at that point, this judge has a reputation as being, she was previously the head prosecutor within the criminal division of the branch of the DOJ, the SDNY, Southern District of New York, that was bringing these prosecutions against us. So she's, a prosecutor's prosecutor. And she's sitting on the bench, and yeah, she has a reputation of being very pro prosecution side, and then also of being a very harsh sentencer. So she loves to give maximum sentences, especially if you take something to trial in front of her. So after we leave this, where she has just denied everything, doesn't want to hear any arguments on it, and doesn't explain her reasoning behind it, our calculations on how this could do at trial are massively changed. It's something I didn't necessarily realize until going through this process, and so I assume other people may not realize as well, is how much influence a judge actually has on a jury trial. They get to determine the witnesses that are allowed on the stand, the evidence that's the jury's able to see, down to even, the kind of defense you're allowed to put on, and the words that you can use in front of the jury. So they really are kings and queens of their courtroom. And with this judge and with her ruling in that way, we realized that there's no chance of getting a fair trial in front of her. At that point, the prosecution came to us and did make a deal, and the deal was, we will drop the money laundering charge, which has 20 years on it, if you plead guilty to operating an unlicensed money service business. And there's like a subsection of that they actually pled to. And that has a maximum sentence of 5 years, and it'll be down to the judge to decide what the sentencing is at that point. And it was really tough. They gave us 24 hours to decide, and it had to be agreed. So both Bill and Keonne had to agree to take the deal. If just one of them agreed, the deal was off the table. And they realized that they were looking at 25 years. They realized that they would not be able to put on a defensive counsel defense, which says, we had lawyers advising us that what we were doing was legal, and that should be a valid defense, and it is oftentimes. But we're advised that we would not be able to use that defense. And so, there's a lot of back and forth that, do we take this? Do we try to fight it? If we lose in front of a jury, we could appeal it, but the appeal system can take 5 years itself sometimes, and you're sitting in a jail for that amount of time. So we ended up coming, to the decision to take the deal. Yeah, and yeah, that's
Yeah, there's so many questions there. The first thing I was just thinking is he was accused of conspiracy to commit money laundering, but that doesn't even mean that he actually did it. And yet they can still give him 25 years just for the conspiracy with no proof.
Yeah, yeah, and you would think to conspire to commit money laundering that they would need to be able to show, here's a criminal and here's you and here's the conversation you had that said, yeah, I will launder money for you. Well, they didn't have that. There was not that. And they knew that they didn't have that. What they were saying the conspiracy was by making the software available and knowing, I guess just knowing that criminals could use it, that's the conspiracy.
Got
I
it.
I still don't understand their logic behind that. I think intelligent people, or maybe even not intelligent people, can put two to two together that criminals use a lot of things that are not intended for them. They use the internet, they use VPNs, they use cars, they use knives. The list is endless. It doesn't mean that the intent was for them, but they said just the act of developing the software was the conspiracy.
Wow, that's incredible. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to share that I'll be a speaker at BTC Prague 2026, the biggest and most influential Bitcoin only event in Europe, from the 11th to the 13th of June. Come and join me to hear incredible speakers like Michael Saylor, Jack Mallers, Fred Fenixon, and many more, and connect with a community of true Bitcoiners. Get your tickets now before prices go up, and use my link below for a discount. See you there. How has this experience shaped your perspective on good and evil in the US and the state of the justice in America?
Um, I think I always knew that there's, wrongfully convicted people in prison. But I think my assumption was it was cases here or there that they got it wrong, or maybe it was a single attorney, that was malicious prosecution. Through this experience and since sentencing, where so many people have reached out and said, no, that happened to me. That happened to my husband. That happened to my brother. It's a systemic problem where and specifically the DOJ, I'm just, that's what I'm familiar with, and it may be happening in state courts as well, but specifically my knowledge is the DOJ and SDNY and EDNY, which are both based out of New York, that they bring they seem to be politically motivated prosecutions that are so outlandish. They're new. They're not based on any, they're novel theories that they're presenting. And because they are the federal government and they have endless resources that they can throw at this, um, people are put in positions like we are where, we don't have endless resources to fight this. And, in fact, we're 2 million plus in debt from not even taking it to court, but it's an insurmountable foe for most people to go up against these politically motivated, prosecutions where they can lie, they manipulate evidence, and the judges, at least in our case, she was acting as a fifth prosecutor from the bench. So there's no, yeah, it's very disheartening.
And the fact that they changed the judge, that seemed very suspicious. Also, you mentioned the expense of trying to fight a government which has endless money, whereas individuals don't. I didn't know all this. It really has opened my eyes too, and I do appreciate you bringing this information to us all. You must be feeling like, why us? Why did they target us?
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, definitely. And I think, right, this has started, and I think we knew for a bit too that, there are people, and there are people in power that do not like Bitcoin. They do not like the loss of control that Bitcoin, you know, provides. And the theories that they've put forth in this case against us, and specifically they were targeting privacy, but saying that non-custodians can be money transmitters, that easily applies to Bitcoin miners. And I don't think any of us want to see a position where Bitcoin miners are having to do KYC information, that to get your transaction included in a block, you need to send them a picture of your ID. And it just makes no sense. But really, the theories that they put forth in this case are leading to that path. Um, yeah.
Well, and even bankers, if somebody used the money in the bank for something that was illegal, are the bankers now responsible?
Well, that's a funny comment. So they have to, right? They do have to do a bank because they take custody. They have to do know your customer, KYC information, and AML checks, anti-money
Right.
laundering. And banks seem to get caught a lot. JP Morgan fairly recently, where employees of JP Morgan knew that money going through from Jeffrey Epstein, I think this came out, was tied to him and was tied to kind of nefarious activities that he was involved in. Um, I don't think they had their houses raided at dawn. I think they paid a fine. So the double standard for I- it's so blatant that these people knowingly had to do these checks. They knew, maybe from doing these checks, that this was criminal money, and the result of that is they pay a fine and get to continue with their lives. Versus, Keone and Bill, they didn't have to do these checks. Therefore, they weren't paying attention to the specific Bitcoin that was flowing through. I mean, they had a general knowledge that criminals do use systems, and possibly they could be using what were, this non-custodial software. But we don't have any obligation to know who they are or check, according to FinCEN. And we get, raided and guns pointed at us. And now my husband's in jail. So yeah.
And it is incredible because President Trump goes as the Bitcoin president, and many of our administration are pro Bitcoin, but yet on the side, this is going on. Is this where your hope comes that you can get through to the president and possibly get a pardon?
It really is. I think so the SDNY, Southern District of New York, it's the same office that went after President Trump, using very similar tactics. They took his public statements and they twisted them and to fit their narrative. So there's that. So he really, I think, would understand the lawfare that was involved in this. And on top of that, the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche had put out a memo shortly after President Trump was elected for a second term that stated, we as the DOJ are no longer going to be going after software providers for the actions of their users. We are going to go after the actual criminals, which I think most people can be like, yeah, that's a good policy. Well, and a lot of other offices of the DOJ did drop prosecutions that they were, I guess, attempting at that point, or investigations. A lot of them were dropped at that point. The SDNY, however, did not. What they did was kind of hemmed and hawed and decided, well, we'll drop the one charge, which was they're all under the 1960 legislation. And so we'll drop the B1B, which says, it's illegal to operate a money service business without a license, because you don't need a license. But we're going to add on the 1960 B1C, which states, well, if the hierarchy of legalities, this is a subsection, it states if you are a money service business and you knowingly are transmitting illicit proceeds, then that's a crime. That's an additional crime. How they factored out or reasoned that even though you're not a money service business, this subsection applies boggles my mind. but the court did accept the plea, and the plea was phrased, when you go up and change your plea to guilty, you have to give something called an allocution, which is, your statement of wrongdoing. And Keone got up and said, I operated and maintained Samourai Wallet, the software that allowed users to transmit their own money, and knowing that criminals could use this software. That was all true. So he didn't lie to the court, but I don't see how that's a crime. I don't see how that fits the language of the statute.
No, absolutely. And I think it was wonderful that he was able to keep his own integrity and say what happened without admitting to anything he didn't do. So, what was the moment that you decided to go all in and learn about all this and support Keone?
Well, so I had been, with him throughout his kind of Bitcoin journey. We were dating when he found Bitcoin, and he fell in love with it. And, I think a lot of us out there, whichever side you're on, you realize if someone loves Bitcoin and you love them, you're along for the ride as well. I did get it. I agree and, support and champion the promises of Bitcoin as well. Um, Sorry, what was that? I got distracted. Well, I forgot my train of thought.
And I like the train of thought you were going on too. I can hear you have mixed feelings about Bitcoin, and I can understand that because on one hand, it provides us this freedom technology that is better money, but we also up against a system that is so entrenched in the fiat world, and it's so profitable to so many that people like Jeff Booth says there's going to be a lot of upheaval as we move forward, but truth wins.
Yeah.
So, but maybe you can speak just a little bit more on your Bitcoin journey and how you're feeling all this, because obviously you'd love your husband to be with you, and you don't want to be the example of what can happen to any of us. I mean, do you have a little bit of fear about speaking out?
Um, I don't. It's something I'm not comfortable with necessarily, and have had to grow more comfortable with. As I'm very thankful that you and others are giving me an opportunity to speak about it. It's um it's a mixed bag, right? So it's not what I would choose to be doing, but I'm thankful for a couple reasons. That, one, that I'm able to raise awareness, and two, it's giving me something to do, so I'm not focused on, it's a distraction in a way as well. The Bitcoin and Bitcoiners who say, right, that there's not a community, and there's not. I would say there's a lot of different communities within it. And we've been really blessed by the support of, long-term support of users that had been users of Samourai Wallet, and, were loyal and may, continued to be loyal after fact. But then also there's been so many wonderful people that weren't familiar with the wallet until the arrest and sentencing, and now being charged, and just that they see the injustice in it, and they understand, and they've been, so supportive. Um, it's really been a blessing that that people understand, because sometimes it feels like, especially when you're going up against, the federal government, you feel so small and alone. And so to have that support, and have people also, agreeing that this was wrong and they should be freed, has been wonderful.
Yeah, I do find that people in the Bitcoin community, even though, like you mentioned, we might have many different ideas, that Bitcoiners in general they have similar values. We all value freedom, privacy, truth. And I found you through some of the Bitcoiners who have been supporting you. And I know Puncher was one of them. Shannon was the one who introduced me to you, and Bob, Bitcoin Veterans. Jesse Tevelov, I've interviewed him too. And of course, Cedric Youngelman, you had a great interview with him. So there are so many people who are supporting you and want to see you succeed in this. Are there any others that I left out? Want to sleep easy? MICROSEED lets you stamp your seed phrase onto a small steel washer. Buy the device once and use it forever. I love it. It's discreet, precise, and easy to transport. Get yours below. For peace of mind with collaborative custody, the Bitcoin Advisor is a trusted team who can also help with inheritance planning. Just scan the QR code or use the link below. And check out these super cool SATOSHOEs with over 40 styles to choose from, plus 10% off with my link below. Now, back to the show.
Oh, there's so many, and I don't want to start listing them because if I forget to name a few,
Yeah.
but really it's all the ones you've mentioned that have really rallied around and offered their expertise and various things or their platforms, but then it's the people that are keeping it that maybe don't have a large platform but are on X, and they're keeping the story out there by tweeting about it, and by anyone who has signed our petition is just like, I think some people think that what's one signature going to do, but we spoke with I've spoke with Lynn Albrecht and Ross Albrecht, and they said that no, it really does matter, that especially when our only option now is to ask for a pardon from President Trump, and the people that he's the president of the United States. He's a very busy man, so he has a lot of people around him who help to filter what information he needs to see. And they're only going to, bring to his attention things that they think a lot of people care about. And so these signatures and getting as many as we can really does help to show them that this is an important topic to Bitcoiners, and that supporting and lending your voice with just a signature really does make a difference. And so I appreciate everyone who's done that.
And he is aware of the case because he has mentioned it, correct?
Yeah, so at a press conference, that was, a big surprise. A big surprise. You don't expect to hear, my husband's name come out of the president's mouth, but he was asked about the likelihood of a pardon, and he did tell the head of the DOJ, Pam Bondi, to look into it. They've been very busy, as I think anyone who follows the U.S. news knows. There's been a lot going on. So, and I understand this isn't going to take, it might be it's top priority in my life, but it's probably not top priority for these people that are running the government. But I'm hoping that she does look into it, and that can see that there was real injustice done here, and that they don't deserve to be in prison, and to grant the pardon, and then also to look into what's been going on within the DOJ, that there are maybe these lower level AUSAs that are holed out from past administrations that do not have the same desires as the president. So one of the other things that happened in this case that made the news fairly recently was part of our plea agreement was we had to forfeit all the money that was ever made by Samourai Wallet. So over the course of 10 years, they made a little under 6.4 million. So that kind of also tells you this was not a criminal empire. That was all the money that they had made in that time. And so it had to be sent, and they never had fiat bank accounts. This was a Bitcoin only business in the truest sense. Everyone, the servers were paid in Bitcoin, and everything was paid out in Bitcoin. So when they went to forfeit, the government wanted fiat originally, and they didn't have that, and it's no way of getting it. But so they said, okay, finally, they said, well, we'll accept the Bitcoin, but you need to sign these forms. And the form said that once they receive it, they're going to immediately sell it. And for whatever reason, they had to sign off and agree to that. So they did. They signed these forms. But if anyone, as Bitcoiners, is probably familiar with Trump's executive order around the strategic Bitcoin reserve and final forfeitures such as this, because there were no victims in this case. There was no one that was, defrauded or lost money because we never held, Samurai Wallet never held anyone's money. So this money was a straight forfeiture to the government. It should have gone to fund the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And so that's just another, they defied Todd Blanche's memo, and now it's another example of them defying President Trump's executive order. And these people are still working within, President Trump's DOJ. And yeah, I think that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, there are really quite a few glaring, things that need to be brought into the open, and I'm so glad you're doing this. Was privacy always important to you and Keonne? And what do you think people are missing about this whole case?
So yeah, privacy always, well, before this, I was a very private person. That's why, my Twitter handle is not one that's easily shareable because I never expected to to be sharing it. And just different things like that. Like it's just I've never been a big social media person. I do value privacy. Keone has as well, and Bill. They got into Bitcoin for the promises at the time. It's, I think everyone expected that yes, eventually this will be worth more than it is. But there were many years where, that wasn't the driving factor. The driving factor was that, this is a way, it's it can't be confiscated from you. You can make the transactions, even if they say you can't make it. So, right, one of the first kind of use cases was to donate to WikiLeaks once MasterCard and Visa had shut off that option. So you can put your money, because where we spend our money is a form of speech. The causes you donate to, whether it be political, religious, whatever. It's just it's a really pure form of speech, what you support. And the freedom to be able to do that and do that without consequences requires privacy. You don't need your employer to know your political affiliation, who you're donating money to, and you don't need the barista that you buy your coffee from to know your net worth. There's so many reasons why we need financial privacy. So that was always at the forefront. They would say they built Samourai Wallet for themselves to use first. They built functionality that they cared about, and their users were along for the ride.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, what do you think people are missing about this case?
I think to the privacy thing, I think people think, well, it's just those weird privacy people. I have nothing to hide. And there's a lot of people that do say that. But the truth is, the theories, as we touched on before, that they used in this case can easily apply to, what's within the Bitcoin space can easily apply to miners. But then if we're looking outside the Bitcoin space, can easily apply to VPNs, could apply to messaging services, right? All their coordinator did for the CoinJoin service was pass messages between users. So these theories can really be used to take down kind of the infrastructure that we rely on. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much privacy in their everyday lives has been eroded already. So kind of back, right, pre 9/11, you'd be able to go open a bank account and you wouldn't need to provide, an ID, or I think some places you need an ID, you need a bill showing your address, you need, it's like 5 pieces of paper you have to go in to open a bank account. And that's become the norm. It's become the norm to take a picture of for any online service. It seems anymore they want a picture of you and a picture of your ID to make sure you are who you say you are. And there's some very valid reasons that some things would need to know that, but a lot of it's just become so commonplace that it's really eroding kind of basic levels of privacy that we had previously.
Yeah, and they might use the reason that they don't want criminals using the money for illicit activities. But at the same time, now they're going to bring in CBDCs, and that's really not about criminals. That's about, I think, trying to tax people or tax every dollar, see where we're spending it, and make sure they get the maximum amount of money. But I don't think most regular people realize this, but Bitcoiners certainly do.
Yeah, CBDs are such an easy way into the social credit system, right? That we say about China. There's a I forget which states, one of the New England states, I believe, is trying to put on some kind of miles, some kind of limit in the miles you're allowed to drive. And if someone can track your money easily on a public ledger, they could see how often you're buying gas and do the equations out of how often you're driving. So there's a very variety of ways that people should just be aware and start caring about it. Because even if you aren't doing anything criminal, and we didn't think we were, and you know it doesn't really matter. They can still come after you.
You mentioned a few people you spoke to, but quite a few other people that this has happened to for different reasons, and just out of the blue, they have been targeted.
Yeah, so there's been a variety. Some of them, there was a lot of them where Amazon, the company, was going to the DOJ, and they had quite a few cases of this where they went to the DOJ and said, we have problems with these people in some way. We want you to look into them. So that's a private company that's able to use the federal government to, investigate, go after, and prosecute in a lot of cases people that they just didn't like, and that was a real surprise to me. There's so many different cases. We saw um, here the way January 6th, there was people, and there were people that I'm sure were violent, but there were a lot of people that had thought they were just following a group in through the Capitol building and left and didn't hurt anyone or break anything, but had really serious charges brought against them, and then evidence hidden in their cases as well, where there was exculpatory video evidence that was not shown. Thankfully, most of them got pardons. There are a few that are still kind of got fell through the cracks on the pardons. And then there's various other cases, and the kind of common thread is their conspiracy charges, because a conspiracy, you think, oh well, that should be easy to defend against because there's no conversation that happened. So but like they did in our case, the act alone of building software became the conspiracy. So to fight against that, you really can't. It's the government's word, and unfortunately, the government, even in when cases go to juries, people do give the benefit of the doubt, and I think we would all like to have that position that they're doing the right thing and they're not lying, but truth comes down to they're people and they have ambitions and reasons outside of justice.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. Where are you on your Bitcoin journey at the moment?
So I guess that's it's kind of hard. So they put a hold, so we were not allowed to transact, or well, Keone wasn't, but by extension, just to be safe, I was not going to either transact in Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies. Was what the statement said from the court. We're currently have fundraising because like I said, we have massive legal bills, and then there's an additional fine imposed by the judge as well that needs to be paid. So we are accepting Bitcoin donations, which I'm so grateful for. Um, my journey, though, I guess, is kind of due to the court things, but then also just I kind of am stagnant, if you will. Like I still follow the Bitcoin news, but it's it's maybe a little painful that this happened, and that, as much support as we have had from people, there's also been a lot of silence on it as well. And I think people
Yeah.
should wake up to the threat to, not just us, but all Bitcoiners in general. And maybe not this administration, but there could be a future one. There was a judge within the same courthouse that our case was in that said, Judge Radkoff, he said cryptocurrencies currently serve no purpose other than providing a platform for fraud and crime. So that's the opinion of these people that are in power, and so it's a scary proposition.
Yeah, it really is. And I do understand that people are afraid. I feel a little bit afraid, but I also feel that if I don't stand up for other people and what I believe in, then saying nothing would also be just as bad as hiding from it. Yeah, and I feel very strongly that I earn my money, and if I want to put it in Bitcoin, that should be my choice as a free American citizen, right? I'm just like, we want to really protect innovators and keep them in the US rather than sending them to countries that want innovators. So I think this is a really important case. Tell us a little bit about how Keone's doing in prison. That that must be a whole new experience.
Yeah, so it is. He's been in for it on the 19th. It'll be a month. So it's been, 3 weeks now. He's doing all right. It's not a place that, you're very disconnected from the outside world, and especially with kind of the way we live our lives today on the internet and getting news all the time, that's been taken away. He's in there with, some interesting people, and they've been very kind, which I'm so thankful for. The other inmates in there, and a lot of them are in similar situations, which is, I guess, kind of interesting, kind of sad. Um, but he's holding up. He's been writing letters for the Rage, and then they've been also published by Bitcoin Magazine, some other things about his experience, and I enjoy reading them. I think he's a very funny writer, and so it's definitely been an experience. He's learning things inside. So instead of the Bitcoin standard, it's the mackerel standard, which is the little pouches of fishes. That's what I guess the has been used as, for a very long time within this particular prison as a additional currency, which is amusing. And it shows you that people will win out, which I think is, a good sign maybe for Bitcoin, that it can, if it, a different currency can exceed inside a heavily regulated place such as a prison, that Bitcoin will be able to succeed out here, even though there's, maybe some opposition. Um, but it's hard. It's hard to be away from each other. They limit your phone minutes, so you can't talk for very long, and there's always someone listening, or your email correspondence. They have an internal email system, but it's very slow. It takes a couple hours to send each way because they read everything. And again, not that we're saying anything wrong or doing anything wrong, but it's still that invasion of privacy, that's there's a third person in your communication with a loved one. It's a little bit awkward, but I'm very thankful. I live about an hour 45 minutes from the prison, so I am able to go see them frequently. A lot of people aren't as fortunate. So yeah, I'm hoping President Trump does see all this, and hear our plea, and is, gracious and merciful, and grants us a pardon.
Yeah. So that would be your message to President Trump.
Yeah, yeah, that please. And I would I would happily answer, and or he would answer any questions he may have, because I'm sure a lot of people, they come from this, and they read the indictment, and they go, wow, these are bad people, and they deserve to be there where they are. But that's just not the facts. If anything that they addressed we have been able to say, no, this is actually what was said, or this was actually what was meant, and it's been twisted. And as I said before, they did that to President Trump, and so I think he would understand that, and really, really get that. Yeah, this is how it operates.
And just to go back to the judge, that is just a great reminder to everybody that what the judge wants the jury to hear is what they hear. They don't necessarily hear all the facts. And does that mean we can still get a fair trial in the US? Maybe not in every place, right?
Yeah, I said Samurai Wallet had been, it's almost 10 years in operation and operating out in the open. They were on Google Play Store. You could download it from other places. There were other Sparrow Wallet and others who had implemented the same technology into their wallets. Again, because everything was out in the open, because what we were doing we thought was legal. And Keone had gone on, there are hundreds of hours of podcasts or writings that he, long form writing he had done, explaining why they built the software they built, and the reasons behind different choices of developing it the way they did. um, but none of that could have come in, right? They would have said those are self-serving statements. You're using my words against me, and I can't counter with my own words. So it really is a strange situation with these conspiracy charges, because it's their facts or evidence are one set of language, and you can't contradict it with your own, because they say, well, yeah, of course you would say that. It's like, well, it's because it's the truth. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, we just gonna have to keep moving forward, keep supporting this case. Tell us how everybody can support and how they can get hold of you or hold of Keone, so that those who want to donate can. We want to thank everybody who's, like you said, signed petitions already and doing even the smallest act on X, getting the word out and getting all the information out, so that this helps everybody's right to privacy and freedom. But tell us where people can find you.
Yes, yes. So thank you again, and thank you for having me on to spread the word. If anyone would like to sign the petition or donate, you can go to billandkeonne.org. That's BILLANDKEONNE.org. And there you can find a link to the change.org petition, and then also donation options. And any money that does come in there goes to, it's split 50-50 between Bill's wife Sabrina and myself. And then, like I said, unfortunately, we have a lot of legal bills and stuff that pile up, and it's anything. It really is appreciated, and goes to just kind of help send the message that this does matter. As far as to get information, I mean, things are posted on the website. They could also follow me on X, and maybe you could link that, because, like as I said earlier,
Yeah.
it's not the most readable username. They could also follow at Keone at KEONNE, where he will sometimes send me things that he wants posted to Twitter. So it is his voice. I'm just copying, pasting exactly what he says. So yeah, and again, every signature is really appreciated. If anyone does have the time, or the connections with their representative or senator, and just let them know. Right, we have primaries coming up here soon in the states, and to let them know that this is something that you care about, right? Because they're coming, they want your votes, and they want your donations, and now's the time to say, well, as Bitcoiners, we want the promises that were made, that this is going to be the Bitcoin capital of the world. And to do that, the developers need to be free to work on what they choose to work on, to for the benefit of Bitcoin. And if not, they will, like, as you said, they'll go to other places, or they just won't innovate at all. And that's not something that I think any of us want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Lauren. I'll post links to everything below, and stay strong. Keep the faith in Bitcoin, because truth does win in the end, and Bitcoin is the only truthful money we have, because it can never be printed, and therefore people don't get corrupt. We know we have some fights ahead, so but I hope you stay strong, and I wish you all the best, and Keonne too.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you so much for having me on.